A 1, 2, 3, 4.
It's little time.
Hi, I'm Neil McCormick, and you're watching Needle Time, where I am overwhelmed, thrilled to be talking to Britain's original guitar hero,
You smooth talker.
Hank Marvin.
How are you, Neil?
I'm very good.
Good.
How are you? You're looking well.
I'm fine, thank you. After experiencing incredible gridlock traffic this morning, it's a sobering experience.
What, to be back in London?
Yes.
Which is not where you're originally from.
No, I'm from the northeast.
You don't sound Newcastle. Is how long did it take you to lose that Geordie accent?
Look, when I first came to London, I had a very broad sort of dialect, really, because the school I went to, the grammar school, one of the ways you could really annoy the schoolmasters was by talking a very broad Geordie accent, you know, going doing the road like, you know what I mean, man? Oi, aye. And they hated that, so most of us tried to develop that. But when I came to London, clearly that was a problem, and many people asked me if I was Swedish. So I thought, yeah. And of course, you realise you have to adjust your speaking in order to communicate, and I did that. But that was just a gradual thing, you know. And I think living in the south of England anyway, you start to modify your accent.
Was it a musical family?
Not particularly in the sense that they were musicians or had studied music, but both my parents had very good singing voices. My mum played a little bit of piano, not great, but you know, she could tickle the ivories. And I had a cousin who lived downstairs who played what I thought at the time as a kid was great boogie-woogie piano. I found that very exciting. And of course, there were times in the year when instead of, say, getting a record player out, because we didn't have one, in fact, not many people did, people would get together and the piano would come into play. So someone would play the piano, people would sing, you know, take turns in singing, all sing together, dance. So that was the kind of background I grew up with, plus the radio, of course.
Mm-hmm. And what was your first instrument then?
Well, piano, funnily enough. I did 2.5 years on piano and stupidly gave it up when I went to grammar school because I hated practicing, and I was a bit of a lazy so-and-so, and I thought, well, with homework as well, there's no way I can combine the two. And unfortunately, my parents were very gullible and allowed me to do that. I did regret it by the time I got to about 17, 18. I really wished I'd kept the piano up.
I think the rest of us are probably quite glad you gave it up, because you took up something else.
I did. I was able to... I wanted to then play clarinet because I was getting interested in New Orleans jazz and Chicago jazz and folk blues music and things. And the clarinet to me was I loved the way it intertwined around the trumpet, very agile instrument. But there was no way I could afford one or have lessons. And one day in conversation with a schoolmaster who took both French and music, we got on to music, and when I mentioned jazz, he said, don't they use a banjo? I said, well, they do. He said, oh, I have a banjo. And I asked him if he wanted to sell it. And he said, yes, as a matter of fact, I do. So I said, how much do you want? He said, £2.10. So I said, look, I can pay you £0.50 a week. He said, okay. And he brought it to school the next day and gave me the banjo. I still have the banjo, but he spent the £2.10.
So it was the banjo. At what point did the guitar kind of infect? Did you see somebody playing it? Was there a big moment?
Well, it was fairly soon after that. I sort of started to learn to play chords. I didn't want to do the fingerstyle banjo. I hadn't really heard that then anyway. I wanted to play the rhythm section banjo as in a jazz band. And fairly soon I was playing in 2 jazz bands when I was at school and singing jazz vocals.
Right.
Oh, you know, full of life's experiences at 15 years old. And then I formed a skiffle group at school, and one of the guys in the group played piano and guitar. And he would bring the guitar along. How we used to work was this. We'd get all our gear on a Friday night, walk around the streets till we found a youth club, and we usually knew where they were. I'd go in and say, look, I have a skiffle group. Can we come and play for you? And they'd go, yeah. And we'd go in there, we'd play for 20 minutes, 25 minutes. They'd give us tea and biscuits, and we were happy as Larry. And if there was a piano there, and usually there was, John Tate, his name was, he would play piano sometimes, sort of, you know, bluesy style piano, and I would use his guitar. So at this point, this is where the interest in the guitar started to develop, because I started to realize the guitar had a lot more potential, for me anyway, than the banjo. And that was it. So I used to borrow this guitar as much as I could, and my dad bought me a guitar for my 16th birthday in 1957. And then, when I had my own instrument, I was able to practice every day, listen to the radio, try to, play the tunes I was hearing, work the chords out, all this sort of stuff. And that was my downfall, really.
So I'm interested in this practice every day because it's the unseen part of what a guitarist does. I mean, you really need to have your scales, or do you? How much kind of practice to get that level of touch and?
Yes. Well, as much as you can, really. In the early days, I didn't know much about scales. I mean, I tried to work a few things out, and I didn't really know how to apply those in musical terms. So I was more working out tunes and trying to, if I heard a sax solo or a guitar solo, trying to remember it and work out at least an impression of it, and work out how maybe I could finger it and pick it. And that's kind of a way a lot of us learned in those days, talking to, my peers. It was sort of later on I started to develop more the scale theory, if you like, working out different scale patterns and relating them to music and so forth. But scales on their own, of course, they're good because at least it's you're developing a technique and so forth. But you can't just play scales when you're playing music. It just sounds exactly like a scale. So you really have to think way beyond that. And I think, really, the reality is most of us as musicians, doesn't matter how long you've been playing, you still feel you can improve. You never feel you totally... I certainly haven't mastered the instrument. And I've met guys, to me, who are absolutely masters, and they will still feel they've got some way to go. So it's a never-ending story, really.
We know you with a very distinctive style that starts right at the beginning, which is to play these melody lines. Is that because of the way that you taught yourself to play?
It could be, but it is also the accident of becoming an instrumental group. Before we recorded Apache, we'd had 2 vocal releases and one instrumental. We had, in fact, been signed as an independent group to Columbia Records as a vocal instrumental group, much in the way the Beatles were later on. It just so happened when we heard Apache and we got the opportunity to take that piece of music and arrange it and record it, and when it became a world hit, that the obvious thing was to follow up with more instrumentals. Yeah. And I've always felt when you play a tune, if it's a good tune, don't murder it, don't kill it by putting your own interpretation on it in terms of extra notes and things. At least not before you've established it anyway. So thinking in terms of a simple approach, commercial approach to music, that was the way I approached it when I'm playing those sort of instrumentals anyway. Sell the tune,
Yeah. So you were very young when you came down to London.
I still am.
Hooked up. You do look remarkably well
Thank
preserved.
you. Drugs, keeps you going.
It does. Aspic, maybe. You were like 16 or so when
16,
you came to London. You went to, which I think the 21 Club or something.
Oh no, 2 Eyes.
2 Eyes.
It looks like 21, but it's actually 2 Eyes. Yeah.
It's a little bit legendary, this place, because it was also where the Beatles got hooked up with their Hamburg gigs and.
No, I don't think so. Not the 2 Eyes. No, not the 2 Eyes.
Yeah, there was the meetings.
Oh, okay.
Took place,
I wasn't aware of that.
And the Vipers came out of there. That I think did they become part of the?
Well, we understood that Tommy Steele, Terry Dean, and Wee Willie Harris had been discovered. That was the expression used down there, which was a kind of mythology. I think Terry Dean was, and possibly Wee Willie Harris, but certainly not Tommy. The 2 Eyes itself was a coffee bar at street level and a cellar below. Not very big, probably not a lot bigger than the room we're in now. And on a Friday and Saturday night, this room was crammed with young people. And because no one could move, the hand jive developed, so
right.
People couldn't dance, so they'd start dancing with their hands. I think that's what they were doing, maybe it was something else. And it had a little stage at one end, which ran the width of the room, not very deep, and, well, deep enough just to set a drum kit up. So the drum kit sat at one end, and all of us, as, say, bass, guitarists, singers, were in a line across the stage. And it was quite a fabulous experience because we got the opportunity to work with different singers and different bass players, different drummers, etc. and most amazing sort of scene, really. And it was the scene when Soho in London was, I think the character was called Jack Spot, and he was the gangster who kind of had that patch or turf or man or whatever they called it, under control. And you never saw any trouble on the streets, no yobs. I think his gang took care of that. They wanted it to be all quiet, you know, no interference from the police.
Right.
Prostitutes on the street corner, etc. So it was a pretty sort of far-out scene for two 16-year-old boys.
The Soho scene then.
Oh, interesting days, yeah. One occasion, when we were playing at the Two Eyes, there were a couple of guys who used to come down there occasionally. They were writers, songwriters. One was an enormous Welsh guy who was quite a good pianist, and the other one was his writing partner. And they pulled Bruce and myself aside one night and said, "Look, we've got a gig at the Bridge House in Canning Town." We'd heard about this place, an extremely dodgy pub in the East End, and he said, we'll take you down there, but you do a little spot with some of the songs you know, some of the, the Every Brother song, all this stuff, and then I'll play some piano, and then you come back on and we'll play this song, My Blue Heaven. So, and he played it through the sort of, because there was a piano in the Two Eyes, dun, 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 dun. So we had to learn that, Anyway, we get to this place, we do our set, he does a bit of a set, and he invited us on, and then a guy came on stage and said, "We'd like to invite Dorita for your entertainment." And we thought, oh, it's a singer, she's going to sing. She got on, started to take her clothes off, and we were right next to her, 16 years old. It was alarming, I would say. Anyway, it was an eye-opening experience in more ways than one. Yeah. Popping eyes.
Okay. Was that, I think, Thunderclap Newman, did you say that?
It might have been Newman, or was
was
that
a
a band?
Thunderclap
It might have been
Newman,
Morgan, Thunderclap Morgan. He was a Welsh guy.
Okay.
Which Morgan's more like it.
It was, so you mentioned Bruce. Bruce Welch.
Yes.
Was your buddy from Newcastle.
Yeah, we were in the
and who later went on with the Shadows and
Exactly.
and had been your kind of lifetime guitar playing sidekick. Tell me about Bruce.
Well, we met at school. How it happened was I came to school one morning, and just outside the school, a group of boys were maybe 6, 7 in a huddle, and I thought, what's going on here? It looks interesting. And as I walked over, I saw the neck of a guitar stick up above the heads of the boys. I thought, a guitar. I went in there, and there was, I didn't know him at the time, there was Bruce holding a National steel guitar, the steel-bodied guitars, which looked amazing to me. I'd never seen one. And through that, we got into conversation, and he found out I played, I found out he played, and he was in a skiffle group called the Railroaders. Whereas we got a cup of tea and a biscuit for a gig, they got paid.
Right.
So, and he asked me about a week later if I'd like to join the band. They needed a lead guitarist, and he'd heard me play by then. So I joined the band as a sort of lead guitarist and harmony singer, and we started to do gigs in working men's clubs around Newcastle and the mining villages and things. And then eventually we came to London, as I say, in April '68, because the group we were in...
58.
58, I beg your pardon, well spotted, Neil, just checking to see if you're awake, in '58. And we came with our skiffle group. 3 of the guys were working, you know, they were older than us, and we didn't win. And the group broke up that night. We stayed in London, and that was the start of it all.
And how, you know, that's a long relationship that you've had with Bruce. Are you still close?
Yes. I wouldn't say we're close, no. We've had many ups and downs over the years, and some serious disagreements over things that have happened, you know, which I won't really go into too much because I'll give too much away. But we sort of see each other from time to time, but I wouldn't say we're sort of close bosom pals or anything. In fact, I saw him yesterday, by the way. Yeah.
You don't revert to Geordie when you're with him, do you?
No. But funny enough, one of his friends, a lovely guy called Mick Johnson, who's a guitar maker, was there yesterday, and he's got an incredibly broad Geordie accent, so I tend to revert when I'm talking to him, just to make him feel at home.
Right. So you, in this first moment, just 16 years old in London, you met Cliff Richard, who is also the other person you're most connected with in the world. What was your first impression?
Of Cliff? I don't do impressions, so.
Well, that isn't a bad impression.
He was in a tailor shop in Old Compton Street in Soho, being fitted for a pink jacket. Right. This was his first professional tour, and it looked great. Actually, it was the idea was the black trousers, black shirt, pink tie, pink jacket, and it looked really good on him. And anyway, we kind of eyed each other up and down, you know, all spotty youths, colour youths, and. But then being in the rock and roll business as we thought we were then, we travelled to his parents' home in style on a Green Line bus. We had to drive out of Cheshunt in Hertfordshire, and we rehearsed in his mum and dad's front room. And it was on the ride there that we really got to know each other a little better. We started talking about the music and the artists we liked, the songs we particularly liked, the movies, the comedy like The Goons and Tony Hancock, etc. And then Bridget Barder and Marilyn Monroe came up, sadly not in person, but they were our favourites, really. So by the time we'd done the rehearsal, we all felt pretty much comfortable with each other, and the tour went through great. We were just supporting the Kalin twins, but it was fantastic. Great reaction. Clear that the audience in general had come in to see him, and that was amazing. He asked us to stay with him at the end of the tour, and that was it. And so it went on and on and on, and here we are today, Neil.
Yeah.
And that's how I met your mother.
It's been a lifelong relationship. And you know, we think of you in the 60s, you were often his kind of comedy sparring partner as well as his guitarist. You know, you were a big part of what was being presented. So, did you is it a close personal relationship or just a musical and show business relationship?
It's been very close over the years, and we don't see each other that often, but I think the great thing is we can pick up like that where we left off. Last time I saw Cliff, in fact, was around 18 months ago when he was in Australia. We have a bit of a tradition. If I'm at home in Perth and he is doing a gig there, he always contacts me before he arrives and said, do you want to come up and do something with me? And originally this was a surprise for the audience, but after a while, you know, after doing this a few times, people kind of almost expect it. So when he was there 18 months ago, we did the same thing. We went out for a meal the night before, did the show, and, you know, we just pick up where we left off, really. We've had a pretty close relationship over the years, and that does continue. And I think you'll find out yourself with some friends, you don't have to see them all the time. It's just like, it's only yesterday, sort of thing.
I've always wondered how the Shadows felt when he did records without the Shadows.
Well, we didn't mind. We were doing records without him. Well, that was the interesting thing at that time in our careers, because, first of all, just like to say, it was Cliff who got us our first recording contract. with Norrie. He said to Norrie, I want you to listen to these guys. I think they should be recording on their own. And Norrie gave us the contract, as I said, as vocal instrumental group. And Cliff was delighted when Apache was a hit. Not so delighted when it knocked Please Don't Tease off the #1 spot. In fact, Cliff was on Apache. Not many people know this.
Right.
He played they said it was a Chinese drum. On the beginning and the end of the record, you get the boom, 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 boom. That's a combination of the toms on the drums and Cliff. So, look, by about, in the early 60s, his second album, Norrie wanted to go in the direction of doing a few tracks with purely an orchestra and some tracks with just the shads, and that's the way it was. And we knew that at some point, obviously, it's going to go that way. But as I say, we were making records without him and having hits on our own, so it seemed logical that he would explore other possibilities.
Come on, pretty baby, let's move it and groove it. Well, shake, oh baby, shake, oh honey, please don't lose it. The rhythm that gets into your heart and soul. Let me tell you, baby, it's called rock and roll. You say it's gonna die, but honey, please let's face it. Well, he just don't know what's going to replace it. Yeah, ballads and calypsos, I've got nothing on. Real country music that just drives along. My head I'm moving. Come on, pretty baby, let's move it and groove it. Shake, oh baby, please don't lose it. It's rhythm that gets into your heart and soul. Hey, let me tell you, baby, it's called rock and roll. They say it's gonna die, but honey, please let's face it. They just don't know what's going to replace it. Ballads and calypsos have got nothing on. Real country music that just drives along. Honey, move it. Hey, move it. Honey, move it.
Hi, I'm Neil McCormick, and you're watching Needle Time with my guest, Hank Marvin. So, I know this isn't your guitar, but it is the make of guitar that you're famous for, the Fender Stratocaster. Was there any particular reason why you chose this Strat?
Yes, there was. It was Cliff who bought me the first Stratocaster about spring of 1959. God, I had a pretty rubbishy Japanese Antoria. It looked very rock and roll, great looking thing, but it was awful. The neck was very thick, and it was slightly bent. I think Fred Flintstone made it. It had that look about it, you know. And when we decided to get something better, we thought, well, what should we get? Now, we liked the sound that Buddy Holly produced, but we also liked the look of the guitar. We'd seen a photograph of it. We didn't know what it was. And we thought, that looks great. It's like, wow, something from the future. And we found out then it was a Fender. So because of the circumstances which existed at the time regarding importing American instruments, there was an embargo in existence. You couldn't buy new American musical instruments in the shops. You had to do it on a private import. So we got the brochure from the Fender factory in California, poured over the brochure, and we decided that we'd go for what we now knew was a Stratocaster. And we went for the top of the range, which was with a bird's eye maple neck, gold-plated hardware, yeah. And what they call a tremolo arm, which is this thing here, right, which is actually a vibrato bar. It doesn't create a tremolo, a vibrato. And that was the thing that really got me going. Not only the sound of the guitar, if I can demonstrate, can I just?
Yeah, yeah.
I'll try anyway. So this is not quite what I'm used to, but for example, with heavy string, like with the light strings, you can do a vibrato with your fingers, which a lot of blues players do, and people like Django Reinhardt did. With heavy strings, they're very hard to move them. The tension is high, and they were. So what I found out was, instead of playing a note like, I could go. If I can get it. This is pretty bad actually because it's wobbling, but and then you find you get pulling the note off like that instead of going. It just gives a little expression like maybe a singer would do. The other thing was you can go. Not that you'd want to, but you could. And the other thing was sort of give it a good shake. Listen to this thing banging. Yeah. This is hopeless.
Dodgy old guitar that we found somewhere in the studio.
Yeah. So that made a difference to me. I could do just like even with a chord thing. Almost like a Hawaiian steel guitar. And it sort of sounds like a steel guitar, but only possible through this thing.
And you had a sort of echo effect on your guitar, did you? I'm thinking of that sort of trademark Hank sound. What's the trademark Hank sound?
Yes. Well, that was the first step. Right. Then we had a Vox AC-15s at the time, which were pretty hopeless because there was so much screaming going on. We honestly couldn't hear ourselves on stage sometimes. It was absolutely hopeless. And then maybe a month after I got the Stratocaster, a little thing happened to us. We were in Liverpool working. Jack Good, the then TV producer who had produced Oh Boy, that when we first appeared on TV, he was now doing a show called Boy Meets Girl, recorded in Manchester. He was a big fan of Cliff Marcel's, and he rang us up and said, look, you need to get over here because I've got Gene Vincent on the show. Gene is one of the great seminal rockers and one of our heroes. So he said, when you get over, you can meet him and all that stuff. So we went over to Manchester, met Gene, and Joe Brown, wonderful guy. Joe, you probably know Joe Brown. He's a great guy. And he was on the show as a guitarist, and he took me on one side, and he kneed me in the crutch. No, he didn't do that. he took me on one side, and he got had a small box with a few knobs on the front. He said, I just want you to try this out, Hank, see what you think. And he gave me his Gibson 335, and I played it, and it had this wonderful slap echo like you get on the early rock and roll records. It's a very short tape echo. Wow, that is the sound I want to get on stage on the rock and roll stuff. And he said, look, I don't like it. I like a clean sort of sound, And to me, I've always said to Joe, his guitar sounds like a plank. It's so dry, There's no... Maybe if you put some new strings on it might help. Anyway, when I got back to London, I got in touch with Jennings, and they gave me one of those boxes, and I was interested to find out, not only did it have this rock and roll echo on, but it had about 5 positions of different echoes. 5 heads. There's a little drum inside, like a flat drum with a piece of 1/4-inch tape, which obviously went round at various speeds, depending on the speed you adjusted it to. And you could tune in different combinations of the heads and get these great echoes that sort of tumbled over one another. And by the time we got to Apache, I chose one for Apache that seemed to work beautifully for that number. And that was it. And everyone, the sound was there, and people then expected that sort of sound. In fact, one guitarist called me the godfather of delay. I think he meant I was late for something.
Well, you were late for this.
Yeah, not my fault.
Now, there was some radical developments in the 60s. It was an explosion of that instrument driving rock and roll. What did you make of Jimi Hendrix when he came along? I know that Neil Young wrote a song from Hank to Hendrix about his guitar heroes, which is fairly impressive. But what did you make of Hendrix?
Oh, look, the first time I saw Jimmy, I tell you, we were at the London Palladium, and it was in a break, whatever show we were in. I can't remember then, but we had a TV in the room, and it was Top of the Pops, I believe, and Jimmy came on, and they played Hey Joe, his first hit, which I thought was sensational, and I loved the guitar work on that. I'd started to get into electric blues earlier on with the John Mayall Blues Breaker album with Eric Clapton on. And before that, I'd never heard electric blues. I'd only ever heard the folk blues on acoustic guitars, which I'd been into. And I went, wow, where does this come from? And then, of course, you know, with Eric in interviews, he'd talk about people like B.B. King, Albert King, all those sort of guys. And I started to check them out. And then Peter Green came on the scene with Fleetwood Mac, and I thought that was brilliant. He was a very elegant player, Peter. But yeah, I loved all those new sounds. And then, of course, it went on and on and on. You know, Richie Blackmore came on the scene with Deep Purple, and I liked his playing. And so it went, you know, on and on it goes. But I loved those heavier sounds and the finger vibs that the blues players were doing, and the foundation of the blues in their music. I really liked that. So I just loved it, that's all.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But I wasn't going to try to copy it because I was doing what I was doing, and, you know, people would realize that I was trying to copy these guys. What's the point? They do what they do, I do what I do.
And did it become more defined? You know, there was a sort of classical element. You started doing some classical pieces, and again, you know, finding these melodic lines through everything. I mean, it's an interesting thing. You know, you could play the melody. Jeff Beck does it sometimes, where he plays what would essentially be the vocal melody of a song purely as an instrument.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, if you're playing, for me, instrumentals in those days, and it's a good tune, you want to let the tune speak for itself, and you've got to play it with expression, with feel, obviously, but you know, some people, I don't think they can rewrite the tune and make it better than the original, which is very rare. Can you do that? So that's the way I approached it. With some tunes, where I'll give you examples. I don't know, things like, say, the Savage, which was a pretty raucous, high-energy tune. Remember Brian May I worked with a while ago, and he when he was younger, he used to try to learn all the Shadows stuff, and he said, you know, people remember the Shadows quite rightly as a band who played lots of great melodies. He said, but I think they forget that you were what we thought in those days, a really hard-sounding band with things like FBI, The Savage, The Frightened City, things like this. And I know what he meant. You know, looking back now, it seems tame with heavy metal, but everything has to move on and develop from what was there before. And I do improvised solos in the middle, which just happened. I never tried to work it out because I wanted to be absolutely spontaneous. And some of them were pretty sort of far out and raucous. But I think, getting back to the melody, it's important that you learn to play a melody. I have some friends who are very fine players who teach young guys. And they said, it's interesting, they all want to noodle and play fast. And he said, what we do, I get some of your stuff out, and I said, right, I want you to learn this piece of music. They go, oh, you know. and he said, no, I want you to learn how to play this. And he said, none of them can play it initially. They find it really hard to play a tune and hold a melody, you know, because they just want to play lots of notes with no kind of melodic structure. It's not about melody, it's all about barrages of notes. And he said, after a while, they realize how hard it is to express a melody. And I believe that's important. I really do.
How's your shredding?
It's hopeless.
I'm Neil McCormick, and you're watching Needle Time with my guest, Hank Marvin. So you got a new album,
Yep.
imaginatively entitled Hank,
Yes, took hours to get to that one. In fact, days and months.
which is not even your real name, is it?
It is. It is. I wasn't christened that, but it is my real name. I changed it by deed poll when I was 18. I was called Hank from about the age of 12,
Oh, really?
and it stuck. And then, as we often did in those days, you know, you want to have stage names. All the actors seemed to have them, and we had people, you know, Marty Wilde, Billy Fury, Cliff Richard, and so forth and so forth. I thought Hank, well, everyone called me Hank anyway, but Marvin sounded cool. And I used Marvin because of, there was a big hit record about 1957 by an American country star called Marvin Rainwater, who's part Cherokee Indian. And I thought, I love Marvin, yes.
Not Rainwater.
And then I met Lee Marvin many years later. No, who did you say?
You could have been Hank Rainwater.
Rainwater, yes. Yes, indeed. Dirty water.
On this album, Hank, you've worked with your son.
I have, yeah. We've done quite a bit of work in the past. He used to be in my band when I was touring in the 90s and 2000s, and he's played on a few albums. But he's a really good player. He's done a Bachelor of Music in Contemporary Guitar, and technically, for me, it's way better than me. But we did 9 of the arrangements together, and he played rhythm guitar and a little bit of electric riff stuff on the album. And it was great to work with him. We have a similar sense of humour, and we take it seriously, obviously, but we can see the funny side of things when we're working, and that happens quite often, trust me.
And these are kind of covers of summery songs. So a lot of sunshine in the titles.
Indeed.
Waterloo Sunset.
Yes, yes. Is there ever a sunset in Waterloo? I don't know.
There must have been one once, and Ray saw it.
Yeah. I've always loved that song. I'm a bit of a fan of Dave's writing, particularly of his takes on British life and things. That is great. And it's a song which lends itself so beautifully to an instrumental. And this treatment is a little different. I didn't do this arrangement. A friend of mine, Nunzio Mondia, who plays, he's a beautiful pianist and a fantastic accordion player. He plays my gypsy jazz group. He did this arrangement, and I said, do something different with it. And he came up with the idea, what do you think? And I thought, yeah, this is going to be raucous, you know, just something a bit different. So I'm happy the way that turned out. But as you say, it has a summer feel. We've got Summertime Blues, Summer of 42, California Girls. You know, you think, not directly in the title, but it makes you think of beaches, surfing, girls in bikinis, boys in mankinis, apparently.
So these are, you know, do you hear a song and think, oh, I'd like to play on that, or that would suit my playing?
Sure, sometimes. Well, going through this material, obviously that was the first thing, is to pick songs which have some kind of connection, you feel, with a summer feel. Secondly, will they work as instrumentals? So if I have a long list, I have to narrow that down to the ones I think are the best ones and that will work. And funnily enough, the one that was probably the hardest to make work was Message in a Bottle.
Right, the Police track.
But the reason I chose that, I've always loved the Police record, and I love the riff on it. I think it's fantastic. And my son, Ben, played that riff. He already knew it, and he taught me the riff, but he played it better than me, so well, you play it. And it was difficult to try to express the verses in that. I ended up doing it on an acoustic guitar. Right. Choruses were easy, and then Ben had this nice idea of changing the riff into a swing feel. So we went through the whole tune, and when we get to a certain point, and then it comes into the same riff, but played with a swing feel, so it's kind of compressed. And the whole feel changes, and then I solo over that section. So I did enjoy playing it, but it was probably one of the hardest to get to grips with.
Do you still work at your playing?
Yes, I do. I have to.
Right.
And you'll notice that when you listen to the album.
You also have been a songwriter, and you've written and co-written songs for yourself, for other people, and for Cliff. You know, songs that everybody would know of Cliff's On the Beach, The Day I Met Marie. I love that song.
Thank you very much.
The Day I Met Marie. It's a real classic of that early shimmery psychedelic British sound. What inspired that song? Do you remember writing it?
My now wife, Carol, we were going out at the time. We met on a movie in 1966, and we started going out. And I was travelling into places like Israel, the Far East, and Australia on tour with the Shads. And I started to think about her, and she's got very dark eyes. But then I didn't want to write an obvious song, so and I thought Marie worked better in the context of the meter. And it sort of came, the idea of someone just sort of lying on, you know, on the grass, and this girl appears. Now, was it a dream, or did it really happen? And that was the concept of the song, and it went on by that. Actually, we had a funny occasion when we were in Germany once with Cliff, doing this song on a TV show. And you know how I don't know if you do know, but they translate the songs or write them out as they hear them, and it's not always the lyric that it's what they think they hear. And there's a line in the chorus where she tossed her hair and tantalized, and they'd written down she brossed her hair and candlelized, which makes the mind boggle.
It just touches on psychedelia, that which was a whole form that took the guitar off on a new tangent. Is that like something? Oh, I hear that sound. I'd like to chase that. Or
oh, I mean, on some occasions, I don't know about on that. I didn't really play on the record. Cliff did it with Norrie Paramore.
Right.
I didn't play on that. Just wrote it. But hearing sound sometimes is a good thing, particularly when I'm recording. The main thing for me is I want to get my normal sound that people like. But as I've discovered over the last sort of 20 years or so with solo albums, I can introduce new sounds. I might, for example, do a solo where it's getting away from the melody, and I will use a heavier sound, a sweet, mellifluous sound, but still heavier, or an acoustic solo. And that's really gone down well with fans. In fact, the acoustic stuff and doing some on stage was one reason why I did an acoustic album a few years ago called Guitar Player. Really, fans said, why don't you do an acoustic album? We think it'll be great. So I did that, and it worked really well.
You had a reputation, the Cliff, and it was very clean cut, clean living sort of version of rock and roll. And you're looking very well for it. Did that make it? Did you integrate well with the heavier rockers and the kind of wild rock side? Were you able to be friends, or was it like you're in different businesses?
It's kind of an interesting period, that, because when we started out, 16, 17 years old, we were pretty greasy looking. You didn't wash your hair very much because you wouldn't have greasy hair. Washed hair looked a bit, poncy. And it was that sort of look, sneering and wearing black shirts and things like that, and sunglasses on stage, and very rock and roll presentation. And I remember Cliff being sort of criticised in the press for being overtly sexy, with his movements and things like this. But what was happening, we toured the USA in January, February 1960 as part of a big package show, the special guests from England, not Britain, England. And it was great. I mean, the audiences loved it, but we had nothing to promote, really. That was beside the point. We were very rock and roll, and we saw that all the currently popular American acts were now wearing either suits with ties or even like dinner jackets, and bow ties. We thought, whoa, it's all heading in that direction. And so we thought, when we get back, we've got to be at the forefront here in the UK, so we'll change from the suits. And we gradually start changing into the bow ties and the things, because we thought that's where it's going. And it was going. And everything started to change. Then people started to follow us and wear that sort of stuff, which was fine. The image that, as you say, was a fairly clean-cut image, yes, it was. I mean, that, whatever happened, as I said, on tour or backstage, stayed on tour or backstage. The press in those days weren't digging into the kind of stuff they do now. But then, when the Beatles came on the scene, for example, it was very interesting. Their image, too, is a clean-cut Boy Next Door image. They have their little round collars and their ties on, and they're, shaking the hair around. And it was the same sort of thing. And when we first met the Beatles, which was in beginning of 63, we just got back from a tour of Africa, and we saw their record, Please Me, was behind the charts. And we went to see them in London. They were supporting Chris Montez and Tommy Rowe. And it was funny, when you think of how things work out. The venue was half empty, and no one screamed when they came on. Anyway, we met them, and we struck up a bit of a friendship. We started to, meet up with each other, go to parties and that sort of stuff at each other's places, particularly when they moved to London or in the London area. And that relationship kept up for quite a while. But it's interesting to see how they started to change as the 60s progressed. And when the Stones came on the scene, remember there was no sort of, you talk about the heavy rock, there was no heavy rock.
Yeah, yeah.
When the Stones came on the scene, they too were wearing ties and jackets with velvet collars. And there was a concerted move, as we understand it, by their manager, Andrew Loog Oldham, to say, hang on a minute, this Cliff and the Shads and the Beatles are pretty clean-cut. What we need are rebels. There aren't any rebels at the moment, so you have to be the rebels. Get rid of the suits, T-shirts, jeans, shirts, jeans, wear what you've travelled in. Get up to a few nasty things like urinating against a petrol pump, make sure the press are there, etc., and create a rebel image, which is what he did, and it worked a treat. But it didn't really bother us because we didn't want to go in that direction,
Right. So what you're saying, what stays on tour, what happens on tour stays on tour, does that mean that behind the scenes, the shadows were...
I remember one night after a show, we all came back and we had several cups of cocoa each.
Wow. Biscuits?
Wow. No, we couldn't afford the biscuits. No, look, plenty of stuff happened on tour, but that's where it stays,
Well, you can't tell us those stories, but you've told us plenty. It was great to hear you play our bit of a plank of a guitar.
But no shredding.
And no shredding, that's for later. But really, it's been amazing to have you as a guest on Needle Time, so thanks to Hank Marvin.
It's a pleasure, Neil. Anytime.